Hey, my name is Meg Nimigon, and welcome to Inside Leadership with High Value Women. In this series, I'm hosting conversations with women leading at the highest levels, asking hard-hitting questions to get to the bottom of what it takes and what you need to be a high value woman in the new world of work. My guest today is Katie Ferguson. She's the leader of Cisco Canada's small and medium-sized business sales. Welcome, Katie. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Meg. It's such a pleasure.
You're welcome. So let's dive right in. I would love to know, what do you personally think people misunderstand most about what it actually takes to operate at the senior leadership level?
Interesting. So I kind of have two thoughts on this. Number one, I think senior leadership, when I was starting out, like I had this perception of that to be a senior leader meant that you were like the best at what you did. And if you did the best work in the job you were currently in, then you would just naturally progress because that's sort of how it worked in school. I feel like you did well, you got the grade, you would advance. But a misconception I see today is that people, especially women, I think have this notion that like if you're working hard, then you'll be promoted or you should be promoted, right? And so I think that's a big problem for men and for women, for anyone, is to assume that good work will go noticed. I think
Mhm.
everyone needs to be assuming that good work will not be noticed because people are
Right.
naturally in their own worlds, in their own heads, they're thinking about themselves. And
Hmm.
so I think women especially need to think about self-promotion and like what is their brand? Who knows their brand? Who knows their work? And who is going to speak for you when you're not in the room so that when an opportunity for advancement comes up, like does the right person even know that you exist? I find especially for females, you're more likely to be polite, right? And maybe not brag. Like I think a lot of women think it's like bragging. However, in my experience, I found like promotion paths do not exist without self promotion and ideally promotion from sponsors. So I think that's like a misconception in itself is that like to be a leader, you just need to do the work, but there's a lot more behind it in my experience.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of one part of it. And then another thing, the thing I think that's maybe a misconception is that like as you go on because you're more experienced the work maybe gets easier, but in
Mm.
my experience and for many of the other women I know who are in leadership roles, I think we know it to be true that like the work doesn't get easier. Like you're not being promoted to take a job that's simpler, and in fact it's usually more complex work, more challenging, a lot more stressful potentially. So I
Mhm.
found in my role as a leader and chatting with other leaders that you need to be able to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and like living in this growth mindset. Like, I think that's just a challenge for everyone. Like, to be able to grow, you need to be able to push yourself and do some things that are hard and uncomfortable. And I find, especially with leadership positions, at least in my world at Cisco, the more responsibility you take on, the more you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And if you
Mm.
can't live in that space and like be open to the growth, you definitely not going to enjoy the job. But for me, that's like created a lot of growth. And sometimes that can be like a little stressful, right? Doing things that are not comfortable. But I think finding the balance of like having a role that's challenging you and asking you to grow, but you can also find like comfort and you're not living, you want to be happy in your role. But I think it gets challenging. You have to be comfortable with doing that if you want a leadership role.
Yeah, oh, amazing. I would love to like ask you follow-ups on both of those things. Let's start with the self-promotion piece. So I'm curious in like a tangible way or like in a way when you reflect back and think of like what has worked for me in terms of self-promotion. Because I think I deal with this with a lot of my clients is coaching them into being able to speak for their work and, tie the work to the value they're creating for their company. And I'm curious, what have you used that's been successful in terms of like how you've maybe approached self-promotion or how you've like done it as a tactic?
So I love that question. When I was starting out at Cisco, I had a mentor early on, Sonia Mezzafero, who's like a super talented, amazing woman, and she gave me this great tip to try and treat projects or treat work that I was working on as a project. So instead of just like doing the task, like make it a project. So it'd be like maybe you have to plan an event for something, but like make it, you're the Tiger team for Project X, and
Mm.
then think about who needs to know about Project X. Who would you update? Who are you talking about the results to afterwards? And sometimes that creates a bit of like, it feels like extra work because you're like, oh, I have to maybe think about doing this follow-up email, or I have to go present to this team now because I told them I was doing this project and now I have to summarize. But
Mm.
in the end, it's held me much more doing that, especially more junior in my career, held me so much more accountable because I really had to think about like, how did the project go? Did I achieve the goal I set out to achieve? And so
Yes.
it made me, I think, better at my work, more accountable, but it allowed me to broaden my audience because it wasn't like me bragging. It was just updating them on the ongoing project. So that's like a good tip I like to give to people of like, see if you can like just create something, not out of nothing, but like you can make it a little bit bigger than it is and just cascade it to the right audience. And then you can increase your visibility that way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I think just like thinking about like who knows your brand is also another good tip of like who is on your board of directors, like who
Mm.
in your world, like maybe at your company or outside of your company, but in your industry, somewhere where you might want to go to further your role, like who would speak for you when you're not in the room. And if you
Mm.
don't know a few of those people who would be willing to figure that out, like take some time to think about
Yeah.
who that could be. And if you really can't think about it, find a mentor who can help you on that and
Mm.
make sure that you can make some of those connections and you don't have to have 10 people necessarily. But I really believe you need to have those people who can advocate for you when you're not in the room, because a lot of, especially leadership roles, for folks listening who want a leadership role, those roles will become open before they're open. So
Mm.
people will talk about it in a room that you're not in. And you want to
Mhm.
make sure that the people in that room like know your brand. So those are kind of my two little tips on that.
Yeah, those are such good tips. I'm so glad that you mentioned them. I think, something I see a lot is, and maybe more with women, I'm not sure, but we tend to downplay the work that we're doing versus upplay it. And I like that you've just, this framing of like, I'm taking on this project, who's part of the team, who needs to know. Not only does it feel energizing, but it feels important. It gives you sort of a reason behind why you might share. Where some people, feel a little uncomfortable sharing when they think about it's just tied to their own task list or like them as a person. So I think that's a
Yeah.
great like way to work around that in your brain of just sort of like making it fun, giving it a name, giving yourself the importance, and then leading from that space. Okay, I'm going to skip to this question around values, actually. I'm curious what your personal values are, or some of them that stand out to you that might be different from values that maybe we've seen in more traditional leadership styles.
I think maybe more compared to a traditional leader, perhaps. Like I try to lead from a place of vulnerability and empathy. I actually
Mhm.
studied psychology in university, which you would know, but maybe some of the people I work with in technology would be surprised by that. But I'm really interested in like what the team is feeling, what people around me are inspired by, what makes them tick. And
Mhm.
so I really try to lead from a place of like understanding what's driving the team, what's motivating the team, what's maybe dragging them down. Because I've
Mhm.
definitely come to learn that not everyone on the team is motivated by the same things. Like some people are like, oh, it's money, it's status. But a lot of people, it's like, I want to be able to finish my work on time to get to my kids' soccer practice.
Mhm.
And I want to be awarded once a year on like a recognition call or like it might be different things, or for some people that might be horrifying for them to be recognized in front of a group
Right.
and they
Mhm.
would like a private something. So anyways, that's something I try to be in touch with as a leader, is like understanding what are the needs of my team and being like super respectful, because I've always found I've got the best out of people when they enjoy working with me. Not that your boss
Mhm.
should be your friend, but I think just like that place of respect of like understanding who they are, what they want, and really valuing that is has led me down a good path. And I try to think about leaders that have inspired me. I was thinking about like who's like a coach or a
Mhm.
friend or someone who's like pushed me to deliver my best work, and think about like what principles did they apply and like can I use it. So not
Mhm.
everyone's principles will work for you, but I try to reflect on that every so often when I'm thinking about things I could do to inspire. I'm like, oh, what did the best people in my life do? And I think that's a great way to draw inspiration.
Yeah, even that question you're asking yourself is such a powerful one of like, it shows your empathetic lens of like, what can I do to inspire my team? Is a question not everyone would ask, right? They would just be thinking the results and this and da 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 da. But it sounds like, with your background, you have a keen eye on the fact that like to inspire the people create the results. Like you can't start with the results if the people aren't inspired. And so it's so cool to see how your brain has worked that out. It's actually everybody likes to be treated differently, right? So it's like instead of just treating everyone like you like to be treated, having that empathetic lens again, thinking about how do they want to be treated, what lights them up, what inspires them is just such a helpful thing to remember for sure.
Totally. And there might be something, ideally, there's something that you hate doing as a leader that someone on your team loves doing and they're
Yeah.
inspired by. And then all of a sudden, as a leader, you can pass off a task to them that's going to be really fulfilling for them and then also lighten your load. So it's a
Yeah.
good question to ask any team you're working on, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, is like, what inspires you? What motivates you? Because on my team, I can see their results on paper, but what I'm trying to drive is like beyond the results. How can I get that extra like 10% out of everyone? And I think that comes down to understanding what drives them. So yeah.
Mhm. Yes, amazing. Okay, so something that I think is interesting is that despite half the workforce being made up of women, we still only hold just 22% of C-suite positions. And when I was talking to my first guest, Sarah Keys, she also mentioned that that stat is even lower on boards. So I'm
Mm.
curious, not from like your more canned responses that you see across this topic, but like from your anecdotal ones. Like your anecdotal experiences, I should say. Like, why do you think that is? What do you think holds women back from being in these positions? And what do you personally think could help change that?
Yes, I think there's the obvious one of that because there's less women in leadership positions, women might not see themselves in leadership positions, right? It's easier to become what you see.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a little bit of a cycle there. However, I would say often when you're moving up to especially a C-suite position, the demands are often much higher on potentially your personal time.
Mm.
And I think women are more likely, especially women who are caregivers, either to like children or aging parents or someone in their family. I think women are more likely to seek roles that have flexibility that will allow them to still maintain like what's important to them in their home life as well as at work. And I think workplaces largely aren't designed for people to have that family flexibility. Like it's built around a number and driving results. And in the past, that's meant being like butts and chairs,
Mm-hmm.
9 to 5 or like 8 to 6, whatever it might be. So I think, if we want to overcome that part of it, workplaces need to be thoughtful about what are some reasonable flexibility things that we can build in, like working from home once a week or being able to join remotely to certain meetings. Or so
Mm-hmm.
for me in my work, I have a lot of flexibility. Cisco's always been a place where hybrid work is encouraged. So that allows me to take on more roles. And in our workforce, we have a lot of women in senior leadership positions, and I bet that's a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do just see it's a natural thing that someone in a family situation might have to make a decision, either the man or the woman or, a partner in the relationship. If you have family responsibilities, someone's probably going to need to decide like who's going to sort of take potentially a step back, or are you going to make a really big decision to maybe bring in someone else to help?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
just a lot of considerations. So I think it doesn't have to be that the women don't take the role, but I've just seen from experience that those are just challenging decisions because I don't think anyone can do it all. I don't think you can do like the crazy job and be the super involved parent. And like, I think there's maybe like chapters. And in some chapters, you'll be able to be a bit more hands-on with your family or with work. But yeah, having the opportunity to be flexible, I think encourages workplaces that will be able to have more
Mm-hmm.
diverse workforces. But yeah, I think that that's a challenging issue to overcome, and not every organization will be able to overcome it. But I see that as like a natural barrier.
Yeah, I love talking about this barrier so much because it's like it's in my vision of like, you talked about the first thing is that if there's not enough women in leadership positions, then first of all, we don't see ourselves there. But second of all, we don't have enough, diversity of mindset to solve that problem, right? And now that we're seeing more women in these roles, I would beg to, take the guess that that's also why we're seeing more flexibility and more solutions.
100%.
And so like I dream of a world where like there are more women representation and there are even like, diversity across all factors because it gives us like different ways of solving that problem. I still think we're kind of stuck in this old way, but we're starting to see the light and we're starting to see that, oh, actually we can create results in less time now. Oh, we can actually have flexibility and our results improve. And so I think it's so
Yes.
great that you named those things because it's like these are things that are very anecdotally challenging. And how do we like there are these solutions that can exist. And I think the more we kind of talk about it and see, what's working and get more women in those positions, there's going to be that much more, innovative thinking. And, we have certain constraints in our lives that make us solve those problems versus just making it a nice to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even I think for like if we could solve it for men too, then it's like great. If
Yeah.
they, because I think probably there would be a stereotype or maybe a concern that if you were the male in that role, you wouldn't want to speak up that like, oh, I actually have to get my kid to that doctor's appointment or I have to leave early to pick them up from school because it's not something that their boss before them was allowed to do or speak about.
Hmm.
But if there was flexibility on both sides of the line, then you can make decisions for your family freely. It's not based on
Absolutely.
gender. Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I definitely think that like when those changes happen, it's going to just impact everybody for the better, right?
Yeah,
So,
totally.
so what's a growth edge for you that you're currently leaning into? You talked about, a bit of your leadership style, how you inspire your team. And going back to what you said about, to get into senior leadership roles, you need to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. You need to be growth mindset oriented. So I'm curious, like in your position right now in life, what's one of those growth areas that you're working on that you're trying to lean more into or get better at?
Few things come to mind. Some I've been working on for years, but one that's definitely a new muscle I'm trying to flex, but I think critical is honestly leaning into AI.
Hmm.
I work in technology, and so we talk about AI a lot, and Cisco's powering a lot of AI that's being developed. Um, in our organization, there's a huge expectation that everyone is using AI. So I've been challenging myself both personally and professionally to figure out where I can use AI. And for me, like using AI as a thought partner has been super helpful. So you don't necessarily have to use it to like generate an email or make a script or something, kind of maybe more of the things that you might think of as a first step, but using it to like bounce ideas around. So you can tell it like, can you act as my personal advisor? I'm in this role. I'm responsible for X, Y, and Z. Poke holes in my plan for my QBR that I'm going to present to the president next week. Like,
Mm.
what are questions that you would ask me if you were this, or you can ask them to be your CFO, or you could, so there's a lot of different ways you can use the tools to just help you think smarter, think differently, and like take in different points of views that I don't think you'd get until you like tested it against a real audience in the past.
Mm.
So leaning into AI has been critical for me. It's been helping me a lot. Still
Hmm.
something I'm working on. Sometimes I struggle for a little while on something and then I'm like, oh my God, I could have just asked AI just to
Hmm.
see. And not always will you get right the outcome that you want right off the bat, that like to see if it furthers your work. But that's definitely a growth area I'm trying to lean into, is just
Mm.
using AI thoughtfully to get further ahead.
What do you think that you believe about yourself that allows you to lean into, building your capacity in an area you haven't built it yet?
I just try to be super open-minded, honestly, of like
Mhm.
having no limiting self-beliefs. Because I
Mm.
think what you tell yourself will become true. And
Mhm.
so I just try to really think open-mindedly about like, why isn't this possible? Or like, what would I
Yes.
need to do to make this possible? So,
Mhm.
and not always does that lead down maybe the path where you're like, got it, I will be a billionaire next week, or I will,
Mhm.
but I just try to have that mindset that like let's find a way to make it happen. And I think if you put your brain and your body and your energy towards making something happen, you're so much more likely to achieve it and be happy in the process.
Yes, I think that must be part of your superpower of being able to tackle these different things and being in these uncomfortable positions is even just this idea that like it's like I don't listen to my limiting beliefs. Like I don't have them. I'm just open-minded. And like I look at the possibility, what if this could work? These are all things that help create openness. And I just want to like reflect that back because there's so many people that would be in those positions and they get stuck at the thing they don't know, or they think that they could never learn it, right? And so it's interesting to kind of dig in and find out what's enabling you to have that openness.
Well, and that's actually been a great place for AI too, because a couple times I have gotten stuck where I'm thinking this isn't possible. but I've been asked to do it. I'll go to AI. Ask AI, like, who has solved a problem like this before? Like, what are the types of things I should be considering when I'm building a plan for this? Or, you think about it however you want to think about it, but bounced off AI. And then often I'm shocked with like how quickly I have a starting point.
Mm.
And then obviously it's great to involve humans. I would much rather prefer to work with humans on a problem, but AI is a great way to get unstuck. I would highly recommend for anyone who's not using it today, 100% you need to start
Mm.
adopting it. It is the most transformative thing of our lifetime. And so people need to jump on the wagon and see what all the hype is about.
Yeah. Okay. So my last question for you is when you flash forward and you think about your life, you think about your career and your life in general, I'm curious, what legacy would you want to be remembered by?
Legacy seems like such a big word. First and foremost, I would want my family, like my experience with my family and my home life to be thought of positively, that like my children knew I was there for them, felt loved, felt like they had opportunities, and same for my partner, that I was there for them. I think for me, that's the most important thing in my life is my family. So I'd want to make sure I show up really well there, my legacy. Number two is like helping people along the way. So that could be people who work for me, who I work with, people in the community. But I love to try and find ways where I can lift people up like a little bit. So, for example, I'm planning a big work event in a few weeks, and we thought of all the business stuff, and we're kind of getting close to the go live. And so now we're trying to like make sure that before we do this event, like what's the big picture? Can we insert a give back where we're going to help someone in the community be better off as well, and not just think totally about the business. So I'd hope it'd be really cool if part of my legacy was that people thought of me as someone who like to help others and did what they could to like leave other people a little bit better off than how I found them.
That's so beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much for that legacy that you are working towards, and also all of the insights that you gave us today from, how you think about leadership, how you work with your team, like the growth opportunities that you're working through. It's all been so interesting to get to hear. So thank you so much for your career and leadership and being an example of one of those women that we can look up to and we can see as examples. And also just for your time today. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Meg, you're always so inspiring. It's nice to spend time with you. And I wanted to say, I meant to start with this, but congratulations. I know you're recently nominated for an entrepreneurial award with RBC. So congratulations, rooting for you. And yeah, it was such a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you so much. Take care.